That senile old bat can't do this to us. Vanessa screamed, her perfectly manicured nails clawing at the legal documents spread across the mahogany table. She's lost her mind. This will is completely invalid. The lawyer's office fell silent except for the sound of her desperate sobbing. But I wasn't crying. I was smiling for the first time in months. Actually, Vanessa, I said, my voice steady as steel despite my trembling hands. Every single word of that will is exactly what your late father-in-law and I planned together, including the special clause that says if anyone contests this will or shows blatant disrespect to me, they forfeit their entire inheritance. I watched her face turn white as the blood drained from her cheeks. Congratulations, dear. You just talked yourself out of $2 million. My name is Margaret. I'm 65 years old, and today was the day I finally got my revenge on the woman who tried to steal everything from me. But to understand how we got to this moment, you need to know how a grieving widow discovered that her own daughter-in-law had been slowly poisoning everyone against her, stealing precious family heirlooms, and actually planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so she could take control of everything my husband and I had built together. What Vanessa didn't realize was that I had been watching, learning, and planning my counterattack for months. She thought she was dealing with a broken, confused old woman. She had no idea she was playing chess with someone who had been in business for 40 years and knew exactly how to protect what was mine. 6 months ago, I lost my husband, William, after 40 beautiful years together, and my world completely fell apart. We had built something truly special together, not just a marriage filled with love and laughter, but an antique dealership that became the most respected and successful in our entire city. Our Victorian mansion was like a museum filled with treasures we had collected from estate sales, auctions, and travels around the world. The insurance appraisal valued our collection at over $2 million, but to me, every piece held memories that were absolutely priceless. William and I never had a large family, just our son Robert, who we loved more than life itself, but who always seemed to struggle with confidence and finding his place in the world. He had gone through a string of failed relationships, and honestly, I had started to worry that he might never find someone to share his life with. So when he brought Vanessa home 3 years ago, I wanted desperately to love her and welcome her into our small family with open arms. She was everything Robert wasn't: bold, social, incredibly ambitious, and strikingly beautiful. She had this magnetic way of lighting up any room the moment she walked in, commanding attention without even trying. Her laugh was musical and infectious. Her smile could charm absolutely anyone. And she seemed to genuinely adore my somewhat shy and awkward son. I remember thinking that maybe she was exactly what Robert needed to help him come out of his shell and build some real confidence. During those early visits, Vanessa would spend hours asking me about our antique collection, seeming genuinely fascinated by the history behind each piece. She would run her fingers along the carved details of our furniture, asking thoughtful questions about where we had found certain items and what made them so valuable. "Margaret, you have such incredible taste," she would say with sparkling eyes. "I hope someday I can learn to appreciate beautiful things the way you do." Looking back now, I realize she wasn't appreciating the beauty or history at all. She was calculating. She was making a mental inventory of everything valuable in our home, figuring out exactly what she could eventually get her hands on. But At the time, I thought I had finally gained the daughter I had always dreamed of having. When William passed away suddenly from a heart attack, I was completely devastated and lost in grief. The funeral was a blur of tears and condolences, but I distinctly remember Vanessa being right there beside me, holding my hand, helping me greet visitors, and making sure I was eating and taking care of myself. "Don't worry about anything, Margaret," she whispered during the viewing. "Robert and I are going to take care of you. You're never going to be alone." At first, her help felt like a genuine blessing from heaven. She would come by the house almost daily, bringing groceries, helping with paperwork, and just sitting with me when the loneliness became too overwhelming to bear. She even offered to help me manage the antique business, since I was struggling to focus on inventory and sales while dealing with my grief. "You shouldn't have to worry about business details right now," she said softly. "Let me handle the day-to-day stuff so you can just focus on healing." But slowly, very gradually, things began to change in ways that made my stomach twist with unease. Vanessa started making small comments about my memory, always with a concerned expression and a gentle tone that made it hard to argue. "Margaret, honey, you told me that same story yesterday," she would say with a worried frown. "Are you sure you're feeling all right? Maybe you should talk to your doctor about these little memory lapses." That's when I realized something was terribly wrong. I have always had an excellent memory. It's what made me so successful in the antique business. I could remember the provenance of hundreds of pieces, recall exactly what I paid for items years ago, and never forget a customer's preferences. But Vanessa was making everyone believe that grief had somehow damaged my mind and left me confused and unreliable. The comments escalated quickly from there. She started questioning me in front of Robert and other family members, making me doubt my own recollections of conversations and events. "Mom, Vanessa's right," Robert said one afternoon, after she had corrected me about something trivial. "You do seem a little scattered lately. Maybe it would be good to have some extra help around here." I felt completely betrayed that my own son was taking her side instead of trusting the woman who had raised him. But what I discovered next left me absolutely speechless and filled with rage. One afternoon, I came home early from a doctor's appointment and found Vanessa in my living room with a strange man I had never seen before. They were standing next to my prized Louis XVI writing desk, the one William had surprised me with for our 20th anniversary. The man was examining it closely with a magnifying glass, while Vanessa stood nearby with what looked like official paperwork in her hands. "This piece will definitely bring at least 15,000 at auction," I heard him say as I stood frozen in my doorway. "The craftsmanship is exceptional, and the provenance documentation you've provided confirms its authenticity and value." Vanessa nodded eagerly. "Perfect. How quickly can you arrange the sale? I need this transaction completed as soon as possible, and obviously it needs to be completely discreet." I backed away quietly before they could see me, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst right out of my chest. My own daughter-in-law was selling my furniture behind my back, probably planning to claim I had agreed to it during one of my supposed confused moments. I spent that entire night lying awake, wondering what else she might have already sold, and how long she had been systematically stealing from me while pretending to care about my well-being. The next morning, I decided to check my jewelry box, and my worst fears were confirmed. Several valuable pieces were missing, including the diamond bracelet William had given me for our 30th anniversary and a pearl necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. When I confronted Vanessa about it, she looked at me with such convincing concern and confusion. "Margaret, Sweetie, are you sure you didn't put them somewhere safe and just forget? You've been so forgetful lately. Maybe we should look together when you're feeling more clear headed. But she made one crucial mistake that revealed just how calculated and manipulative she really was. I had secretly moved my most valuable jewelry to a safety deposit box months earlier, right after William's death, because I was worried about security. The pieces she claimed I had misplaced were actually expensive looking costume jewelry that I had deliberately left in the box as decoys. She had stolen fake jewelry and didn't even realize it, which proved she was grabbing anything that looked valuable without taking time to properly examine it. That's when I knew I was dealing with someone far more dangerous and cunning than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just a greedy daughter in law looking to make some quick money. This was someone who had been systematically planning to take over my entire life, piece by piece, until there was nothing left of me or my independence. She was trying to gaslight me into believing I was losing my mind so that eventually she could have me declared incompetent and gain control of everything William and I had worked so hard to build together. I knew I needed help, but I also knew that nobody would believe me if I didn't have solid proof of what Vanessa was doing. So I made a decision that probably saved my life and everything I had left. I secretly hired a private investigator, a sharp woman named Linda who specialized in elder abuse cases. Mrs. Eli to Margaret, she said, during our first meeting. Unfortunately, what you're describing is more common than you might think. Adult children and in laws sometimes see elderly family members as obstacles to inheritance rather than people deserving of respect and care. Linda installed tiny hidden cameras in my home and began documenting everything that happened when I wasn't there. What we discovered was so much worse than even I had suspected. Vanessa had been bringing potential buyers into my home regularly, giving them tours of my most valuable pieces like she already owned them. She had been telling people that I was deteriorating rapidly and would probably need to be moved to a nursing home within the next few months. But the most shocking discovery was a phone conversation Linda recorded between Vanessa and someone who was apparently a lawyer. The old woman is getting suspicious, Vanessa said, pacing around my kitchen like she owned it. We need to accelerate the timeline for having her declared incompetent. I've been documenting her supposed memory issues for months now, and I think we have enough evidence to convince a judge that she can't manage her own affairs anymore. She actually laughed during that conversation, a cold, calculating sound that made my blood run cold. Once I have power of attorney, I can liquidate everything quickly and quietly. The antique collection alone should bring in at least 2 million, maybe more if we find the right buyers. And that ridiculous old house is worth another million easily. By this time next year, Robert and I will be set for life, and nobody will be able to question any of our decisions. Linda presented me with hours of video evidence, recorded conversations, and documentation of stolen items. Mrs. Ayu? Margaret, she said, grimly. This woman has been committing multiple felonies: elder abuse, theft, fraud, and conspiracy. We have everything we need to not only protect you, but to make sure she faces serious legal consequences for what she's done to you. Meanwhile, Vanessa was pushing harder than ever to isolate me from Robert and convince everyone that I needed professional care. She arranged for what she called a family meeting to discuss my situation, inviting Robert, my sister Helen, and even my longtime family doctor. I'm really worried about Margaret's safety, she said, with fake tears in her eyes. Yesterday, she accused me of stealing jewelry that she probably just misplaced. She's becoming paranoid and confused, and I think she might be a danger to herself if she keeps living alone in that big house. Robert looked torn and confused, clearly wanting to believe his wife, but also uncomfortable with the idea of forcing his mother out of her own home. Maybe we should just try having someone come in to help Mom during the day, he suggested weakly, but Vanessa shook her head firmly. Robert, honey, that's not enough. She needs professional round the clock supervision. There are some really nice facilities that specialize in memory care. She would be so much happier and safer there. That's when I knew I had to act immediately before she could manipulate everyone into making decisions about my life without my consent. I called Linda and told her it was time to reveal everything we had discovered. Mrs. Margaret, she said, I think the most effective approach would be to let Vanessa think she's winning and then expose everything at once in front of witnesses. Are you prepared for a confrontation that might get very ugly very quickly? I had never been more ready for anything in my entire life. The will reading was scheduled for the following Monday at William's lawyer's office. Vanessa had been practically giddy with anticipation for days, clearly expecting to inherit a fortune that would set her up for life. She had even made comments to Robert about looking for a bigger house and maybe taking a long vacation to Europe once everything was settled. She had no idea that William and I had updated our will just 2 months before his death, specifically because we had started to have concerns about her motivations and behavior. The lawyer's office was packed that morning. Robert and Vanessa arrived dressed like they were attending a business meeting rather than a family gathering, with Vanessa carrying a leather portfolio that I suspected contained paperwork she planned to use to challenge anything she didn't like about the will. My sister Helen was there, along with Linda, my private investigator, and Detective Rodriguez, who had reviewed all of our evidence and was prepared to make arrests if necessary. William's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, began reading the will in his calm, professional voice. The first part was straightforward: small bequests to charity, personal items to Helen, and some money set aside for Robert's future children, if he ever had any. But then came the section that made Vanessa's face light up with greedy anticipation. To my beloved wife, Margaret, I leave the entirety of my estate, including our home, our business, and all personal property, with the understanding that she will distribute these assets to our family members as she sees fit during her lifetime or upon her death. Vanessa's smile faltered slightly, but she still looked confident. She probably thought she could easily manipulate me into giving her whatever she wanted, just like she had been doing for months. But Mr. Thompson wasn't finished reading yet. However, he continued, should any family member attempt to contest this will, challenge Margaret's mental competency, show blatant disrespect or hostility toward her, or attempt to manipulate or defraud her in any way, that person will be immediately and permanently disinherited and will receive nothing from our estate. The room fell completely silent as the implications of those words sank in. Vanessa's face went white, then red, then white again as she realized what had just happened. What exactly does that mean? She demanded, her voice already rising in pitch. Are you saying that Margaret gets to decide whether or not we deserve our inheritance? That's completely unfair and probably illegal. That's when I stood up, feeling stronger and more confident than I had in months. Vanessa, I said clearly, it means that William and I knew exactly what kind of person you were, and we took steps to protect our family's legacy from people who would abuse and steal from vulnerable family members. I nodded to Linda, who opened her laptop and began playing the recorded videos of Vanessa giving tours of my home to potential buyers, discussing plans to have me declared incompetent, and laughing about how easy it would be to steal everything William and I had worked for. The look of absolute shock and terror on Vanessa's face was something I will never forget as long as I live. She tried to deny everything, claiming the videos were fake or taken out of context, but her voice was shaking so badly that nobody could take her seriously. Robert! She screamed, turning to my son with desperation in her eyes. You can't believe this. I love your family. I would never hurt your mother. But Robert was staring at the laptop screen in complete horror as video after video played, showing his wife systematically planning to destroy his mother's life and steal everything she owned. Vanessa, he said quietly, his voice broken with pain and disbelief. How could you do this? How could you lie to me and use me to hurt my own mother? That's when Vanessa completely lost control and showed everyone exactly who she really was underneath her charming facade. Your mother is a pathetic, lonely old woman who was going to die soon anyway, she screamed, her beautiful face twisted with rage and hatred. Why should all of that money and those valuable antiques just sit there gathering dust when Robert and I could actually use them to build a real life? She's selfish and bitter, and she's been trying to turn you against me from the very beginning. Detective Rodriguez stepped forward at that moment, pulling out his handcuffs with a grim expression. Vanessa Chen, you're under arrest for elder abuse, theft, fraud, and conspiracy to commit financial crimes against a vulnerable adult. You have the right to remain silent, and I strongly suggest you use that right instead of continuing to incriminate yourself. The moment those handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders that I hadn't even realized I was carrying. Months of fear, confusion, and self-doubt disappeared in an instant as I watched the woman who had tried to destroy my life being led away in custody. Robert was crying, apologizing over and over again for not believing me and not protecting me when I needed him most. Mom, he said through his tears, I'm so sorry. I should have listened to you. I should have trusted you instead of letting her convince me that you were losing your mind. Can you ever forgive me? Of course I forgave him. He was my son, and he had been manipulated by an expert who had spent years learning exactly how to push his buttons and exploit his insecurities. The important thing was that he finally saw the truth and was willing to stand by me. In the weeks that followed, the full scope of Vanessa's crimes became clear as police investigated her activities. She had stolen over $50,000 worth of jewelry, artwork, and antiques from my home, selling them through various dealers and online platforms. She had also been intercepting my mail and forging my signature on documents, trying to change beneficiaries on insurance policies and bank accounts. If her plan had succeeded, I would have lost absolutely everything and probably ended up spending my final years confused and isolated in a nursing home, wondering why my own family had abandoned me. The legal proceedings were swift and decisive. Vanessa pleaded guilty to multiple felony charges and was sentenced to 3 years in prison, followed by 5 years of probation during which she was prohibited from contacting me or any member of my family. She was also ordered to pay full restitution for everything she had stolen, though, frankly, I was more interested in seeing justice served than getting my money back. The divorce from Robert was finalized within 6 months, and she lost any claim to marital assets or future inheritance from our family. Robert and I spent many long evenings talking through what had happened and rebuilding our relationship. He moved back into the family home temporarily while he sorted out his life and figured out how to move forward. Mom, he said one night as we sat in the living room, surrounded by all the antiques Vanessa had tried to steal, I learned something really important about myself through all of this. I was so desperate to be loved and accepted that I ignored every red flag and warning sign. I let someone I barely knew convince me to doubt and disrespect the woman who raised me and loved me unconditionally my entire life. We worked together to rebuild the antique business, and I discovered that Robert actually had a good eye for valuable pieces and excellent instincts about customer service. He had just never had the confidence to trust his own judgment before. Having him as my business partner gave me renewed energy and excitement about the future. And it gave him a sense of purpose and accomplishment that his relationship with Vanessa had never provided. I also learned some important lessons about myself during this ordeal. I realized that I had been so eager to welcome Vanessa into our family that I ignored my own instincts when something felt wrong. There were signs from the very beginning that she was more interested in what we owned than who we were as people. But I dismissed those concerns because I wanted so badly for Robert to be happy. In the future, I promised myself I would trust my gut feelings and speak up immediately when someone's behavior didn't match their words. The experience also taught me that age and grief don't make you weak or vulnerable unless you allow them to. I had felt so lost and confused after William's death that I almost let someone convince me I was losing my mind. But the truth was that my judgment and instincts were as sharp as they had ever been. I just needed to trust myself and fight back when someone tried to take advantage of my temporary sadness and loneliness. Today, I'm 65 years old. I own a thriving business. I live in a beautiful home filled with treasures and memories, and I have a wonderful relationship with my son who has learned to value honesty and loyalty above everything else. I survived an attempt to steal my life, my dignity, and my legacy, and I came out stronger and wiser than before. The most important thing I want you to understand is that respect isn't something you lose just because you get older or go through difficult times. You don't become less valuable or less deserving of honesty and kindness just because you need help sometimes or because you're grieving a loss. Anyone who tries to take advantage of your vulnerability or convince you that you're not capable of making your own decisions is showing you exactly who they really are. And you should believe them the first time. If this story resonated with you, or if you've dealt with something similar in your own family, please subscribe to my channel, hit that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single comment, and I love hearing from people who understand that wisdom and strength don't disappear just because your hair turns gray. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, never let anyone convince you that you're not worth fighting for.